I'm going to bring Tim Hill on stage. He's the Director of Product Management at NICE. His session's about tackling the crucial role of content preparation for AI and KM. Discover strategies for optimizing content for AI-powered features such as generative speech. Did you know if it uses delves, it's probably generated by ChatGPT? Because that is not a word most people use. Anyway, that's a fun fact. Hill delves into everything from data structuring to crafting effective prompts, equipping you to unlock your knowledge base's true potential. See AI in action with a compelling case study showcasing a real-world application of generative search and its significant impact. Without further ado, I'll bring on Tim.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks, everyone, for sticking around. Congratulations, you made it. The almost last presentation of the last day of Knowledge World 2024. So thanks for being here. Just a shout out to everybody who's made it such a great week. Hopefully everybody's had such as good an experience as we have. And with that, I'll jump into the presentation. Okay, so as Brian mentioned, I run product for CX1 Expert. Expert is NICE's knowledge management product here at the Knowledge Management Conference. And just to give you a little bit of background about us, our vision is focused on knowledge retrieval and discovery. We work to make knowledge consumption easy on behalf of our customers. On average, every day, we process about 60 million events across the platform. We have about 1.5 million page views. And our average customer has about 10,000 pages of content. So great systems for retrieval augmented generation, which I'm sure you've heard a lot about this week. We have 3 primary constituents that we serve: the employee or the agent, the consumer, and many of you, the knowledge manager. And we are privileged to have an honor to serve many of these brands that you see here. A lot of household names, probably some of them you've seen and used yourselves. So we are here to talk about AI, so let's sort of set the stage. Content's really important. Content requires management. Content requires a lot of maintenance and upkeep. Search, as you know, has been with us for a long time, and on average, if you look out across our platform, we service about 350 million searches a month. 24% of the time, people click a blue link and they follow a search link. 57% of the time, we judge them to be converted. That means they spent enough time on the website that we judged they arrived at some degree of value. And 16% of the time, they don't find what they look for and they abandon the site. So what does all this mean? And what is its relationship to generative AI? Well, you might want to ask yourself, what if every user on your platform could have a personalized knowledge experience? And the foundation models, large language models, that I'm sure you've heard a lot about this week, are arguably the first time we've been able to have contact with a personalized knowledge experience for every consumer of your content. And what we're showing here is our generative search capability. NICE has a number of Gen AI capabilities in the marketplace. This is our generative search capability, and I'll talk about that a little more throughout the presentation here. But just think about having a personalized knowledge experience for everybody that wants to consume some of your content. It's pretty powerful. But in order to do that, you got to focus on content. And as many of you who are knowledge managers know, content powers everything that we do. And it also requires investment and nourishment. In the way of preparing for this presentation, I looked at some statistics, some research that had been done. 90+% of customers surveyed are willing to use a knowledge base to service their needs in relationship to solving a problem. In fact, 80% would prefer to do that than actually talk to an agent. 29%, 30% of the content on the internet is judged to be duplicated. And over 70% of content inside of organizations is judged to be either outdated or no longer valuable. So if we want to have good generative experiences, if we want to have good consumer experiences, we have to invest in content. So over the last couple of years, we've been working with customers to implement generative capabilities, and we've seen 3 common things that are associated with content and are things I'm going to talk about now because they're things that you're going to want to be mindful of as you focus on generative capabilities. Just to see who's in the room, how many people are actively working now on some sort of generative capability in their company? Just show of hands real quick. So that's most people. We can see we're not alone here. So that's good. So hopefully this is timely and will be resonant. All right, so the things that we've learned in the last couple of years as we've gone about deploying our generative capabilities, it's easy to assume as a human that something is true when it doesn't exist. Like everybody knows you shouldn't drive intoxicated. You don't need to be told that. You're just conditioned to understand that. But in these models, you have to define everything in order for a model to serve up a quality response to your consumer, your constituent. So as I mentioned, duplicate content, unclear content, missing content, these are three common things that we've seen with every customer that we've worked with. And I'll just talk about some examples of those, and hopefully this will be something you can take back that might be meaningful as you go about working on your generative strategy. So duplicate content. So here in this scenario, you can see that I'm using a gen search agent and I'm trying to change my password. The problem is that there are two articles in the knowledge base, two duplicate pieces of content about password reset. The problem with this is one of those is from version 1, and in my example here, the other one is from version 2. And in this example, in version 2, I've introduced something called multi-factor authentication. So password reset is different. And the challenge with this duplicate content is if you use a RAG system, retrieval augmented generation, the answer that's being served is utilizing both of those pieces of content, which means your consumer is not going to be able to reset their password, and they're going to potentially stop using your application because they're frustrated with that. So duplicate content and eliminating duplicate content is particularly important. It's arguable that these foundation models will at one day be sophisticated enough to understand things like this, but they're not quite there yet. Excuse me. Unclear content is also really challenging, and this one is even more challenging as humans, and this example maybe will illuminate that for you. You can see question 5 there, or FAQ 5. The consumer here is asking about will a customer receive a payoff letter? Well, apparently in finance, at least in finance in the automotive industry, a payoff letter and a buyout letter are actually the same thing. But the foundation model doesn't know that. And you can see in question 5, the question indicates, will the customer receive a payoff letter? And the answer says the customer will receive a buyout letter. The models don't know that. These foundations models don't know that. So what you end up getting inside of a gen search experience is this content is inadequate to answer your question. And that the answer is actually there. It just isn't clear, and the model can't ascertain that. So making sure that your content's clear, making sure that you're not assuming that things that you understand as a human you want to make sure that those things are reflected in your content. The last example I have here is missing content, and this one may be a little more obvious, but if you work at the retirement community and you know that the fitness center is always open from Monday to Friday from 8 a.m. to 7, you might assume that the model should answer that question for you. But it's not listed in the content. So you're not going to get an answer. And here's another consumer who would have been able to get an answer to an easy question, but it doesn't exist in the content. So you're not able to deliver that answer. So these are 3 of the more common things that we have seen in our work in the last couple of years. And if you focus on these 3 things, you will overcome a lot of challenge in relationship to serving up content inside of RAG systems for generative capabilities. So you may be asking, well, this is great. What can I do about this? And we've got a few recommendations for that. First of all, customer-centric is really important. So there's these sort of 3 pillars that we've worked with our customers on to share in terms of an on-ramp towards higher quality content and its readiness for AI. First of all, user focus. So the big shift really is we're moving from a world of I want to document what my product or service does to what are the questions that I want to answer for this particular content. And that's really a shift that I would encourage you to take away and think about it. That may be the most important thing I say here. Content quality, as you all know, is always important, but it's more important now because these agents, these gen search agents, are answering questions without human oversight. So content quality is really important. Measuring the way that your consumers are interacting with generative responses that you're delivering is important, and looking at that over time is also important. I'll talk about baselining in just a moment. And then finally, we're at a knowledge management conference. I think everybody can appreciate information architecture and data structure. It is now more important, in my judgment, in our judgment, our experiences, than it has been in the past. With generative capabilities, the more structure you can drive through your content, the higher the quality, the results that you're going to get out of those generative capabilities. So there's just a few other things I'll mention before I wrap up. Some other considerations to be mindful of. Tables don't work really well in large language models. Everybody familiar with the context window? Show of hands, context window. Okay, not that many. That's the amount of content you can put into the large language model that it can deal with at any one time. Tables, in order for tables to function in large language models, in a RAG system, you have to send the whole table. So if you have a table on a website, when you click print, it's 100 pages, it's too big. You need to keep the tables smaller and simple. So don't create nested tables, because all of that content has to go through your RAG system every time you want a generative answer, and if nothing else, it's really slow, but you can fill the context window and you won't get the answers that you're looking for. PDFs can be a challenge. So if you have PDFs that have if-then, really if you have content anywhere that has if-then statements, those don't work very well with foundation models. The other thing is, if you have complicated PDFs that have, say, 10 steps, and step 5 refers to step 9, and then if the answer to step 9 is no, you go back to step 7. These don't work well in large language models in a RAG system, so you want to streamline those kinds of procedures so they're much easier to follow, much easier to use. Prompt and persona management, this is what the industry's called prompt engineering. Most people have probably heard of that, I would imagine by now. But it's really the way in which, the personality that you want to give your Gen Search agent. And we've found that following as closely as you can, following your brand voice and your brand guidelines are ways that you can give the Gen Search agents or chatbots, if that's what you're using, a personality that's similar to the brand of your organization and what you're trying to represent. And I think the key thing here is you have to do a fair amount of testing to make sure that the answers that you're getting do in fact represent the brand that you're trying to portray. And then finally, baseline questions. So we get a lot of customers who want to know what is the impact of content changes on the answers to the questions that their consumers are asking. And we came up with this concept called baseline questions. So you start on day 1 and you ask a set of baseline questions, you record those responses, and you evaluate them as a subject matter expert. And then you do that same kind of activity over time, and you can compare those generative answers in relationship to content changes. There's a new trend emerging. It's been around for a little while, called RAGAS. That's Retrieval Augmented Generation Assessment. And this is a more automated way that's starting to emerge. It's kind of technical and a little bit complex, but it's starting to emerge in a way that you can do this concept of baselining more tangibly. So look out for that as you're going about working with your generative systems. And then finally, I'll just leave you with sort of 3 takeaways. Personalized Gen AI is here. We have an opportunity to make contact with that as practitioners, and I think it's going to be good for many of the things that we do and help many of the consumers that we serve. But it does require high quality content, and as I'm sure everybody here knows, high quality content does require investment, and that's important now, more important now arguably than it ever has been. And I will just leave you with the final thought that existing knowledge management practices largely are really still important, and I would argue now more important than they've been in the past. So with that, thank you very much. Scan our QR code. Thanks, Brian.